So for dinner we're eating this. And when I was in my teens, I learned how to cook Indian food with using cookbooks. And one cookbook in particular I loved. And then I went to college in a small town, and then I moved to the big city. And I discovered these things, the instant Indian spice mixtures and stuff that you find in the international food aisles at Superstore. And it already has a bunch of different spices mixed up. So it makes it easy. You can put a bag of this washed off in a slow cooker or crock pot with I don't know, about maybe a quarter of one of these packages worth of spices. And I mean, this has a huge amount of protein, and that's very easy to make. So I mean, it has a lot of calories too if you're eating that much of it, but which James would be eating a lot of calories right now. And so all this is just this plus this equals that in the slow cooker. And what I've done with James's is I put in coconut milk into his. All I did was, well, you know how I use the coconut cream. I take the can of coconut milk and I put it in the fridge, and then the cream separates, and you can use the cream to make like a whipped cream for fruit or whatever. And then the rest of it I just heat it up separately, and then I can add to that. And so another great thing about this is you can keep this in the fridge, and well, one, like I can eat it just like this, and that's great. Or I can keep the rest of it in the fridge and just keep adding little changes to it. So one day I might decide I was planning on adding chopped, there's these, I don't know, that size of orange tomatoes that were given to us, and I was planning on chopping them in half and taking out the seeds and adding that to this. And then one day I might want to add potatoes to it, or green beans, or whatever. Methi, the fenugreek leaves, fresh. You can buy them in bunches from Superstore for a reasonable price. And then that's a good idea if you happen to be diabetic, to start discovering a taste for that, developing a taste for that. Yeah. So anyway, I was going to talk about this a little bit, because if you're in a detox and you're not very wealthy, you can't necessarily eat organic brown rice cakes and organic Granny Smith apples all the time. I really look forward to eating that. That was given to me, and I'm very thankful. But you can do the best that you can. Sometimes you might get organic strawberries like James is having, organic Granny Smith, and other times, maybe you have to cook some yellow split peas from the bag, and you know that these would not have been grown really well or whatever, but we were given those, and I'm thankful for that too. And we were given this, and I'm thankful for this, and it reminds me of when I was in my early 20s, and I would make just about everything from spice mixtures like that, because I had done it the cookbook way, and that took a lot more work, and just finding the spices, because it's different now, but I'm from northern Alberta, and I mean, getting those spices was a trick. So, and then trying to figure out, well, what can I substitute for it? And you can't, right? But some of the meals got really creative, which is great. And anyway, so I discovered the spice mixtures. I was using them. And my sister, basically, she did the same thing, but she discovered the ones that are in the jars, that you just add that to the beans and cook. But that's way more expensive. This is really a very economical way to do this. Just get these spice mixtures. So this is what I did. And so you can make this for next to nothing. And just keep adding little things to it over the week to make it a little more interesting or whatever. So that's what I would do. And so that's what I'm going to do this time, and it'll remind me of being young. And one thing I was going to say about that, though, is that grows old pretty quick. At first, when you discover these spice mixtures, you're like, great, I'm going to be able to cook with them all the time, and you just want to use those all the time. And then you don't. Then you're like, no, I can still taste this tastes the same. And then you're thinking, well, maybe if I add a little bit of cinnamon to it, it'll be. But you can still taste the mixture underneath, and yeah, so it doesn't quite work out as well as you would probably hope that it would. But if you're pressed for time, like I was living in a tiny apartment. It was in Calgary. It wasn't even a one bed. It was advertised as a 1-bedroom apartment, but it really wasn't. It had a big closet that was just a built-in that separated the bedroom area from the living room area. So really it was just a bachelor suite that somebody had gotten creative with and said, we can make more money if we say this is a 1-bedroom. So I lived in that for a while, and then I lived in a neighborhood where it was very dangerous, very bad neighborhood. I mean, both neighborhoods were bad, but the other one was terrible. Like, I go back to that neighborhood now and I think, gosh, how did I? But young people, they can somehow, they move to the big city and everything's rose-colored glasses, it's just bright lights, big city, and it all seems so exciting, and it really is. It's very dangerous. I don't know, somehow. But anyway, and now this little city's turning into a big city, and I don't like it. I'm too old for this. It's too exciting for me now. But anyway, I don't know. James said he was going to come out. Oh, his soup will just get cooler. He doesn't care. Really, for James, every soup is gazpacho. He doesn't like hot soup, so that's okay. I like it hot. Which it is not right now. Mine's gazpacho. Well, not quite. It's warmish. But yeah, that's good. And plus you can do things too, like you can have, I don't know if you can see, this is quite thick. So, well, I cooked it this way. So, anyway, I can serve this too with just a little dollop of this. And like a big bunch of different kinds of vegetables or whatever, and yeah, then it's a bit healthier, because really it's a pretty, I mean, for cheap food, it's for cheap instant food. I don't know if you can get better than this, honestly. It's so cheap. Use some spices and cook some peas or beans or lentils. So anyway, when I'm detoxing, I'll still eat things like this because we don't have a lot of money. And I'm thankful that I'm able to eat things like this or things like this at the same time. So, James, do you want to talk about what Einstein got wrong? The first disc. There's only 2 discs in this course pack, so it's not not that.
There's only 2 discs. There's more stuff.
There's one more disc, so you are halfway through.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, because this is the whole package, right?
Yes.
It feels as though I've gone through the history of the world.
It felt long, and I only caught the end of it.
A brief history of time, or intellectual crime, maybe is what it should be. But this guy's as phony as an $11 bill. And where does he teach? Senior scientist. Wow. And head of the very theoretical astrophysics group at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory. So Fermi's the guy that started the first chain reaction, I believe, and it was probably in the predecessor to this laboratory. And that was at the University of Chicago. Let me just see where this crazy thing is. He is also Associate Professor of Astronomy and Astrophysics. Oh, there we go, at the University of Chicago. He received his PhD in physics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, just down the road from Chicago to the northwest. So Madison's the capital of Wisconsin. And there's a big university. There's a public university, actually, not that prestigious. Chicago is a private university, and it is quite prestigious. Could be ranked top 30 in the world. Top 40 in the world. He's the author of 2 books written for non-scientists and written by a non-scientist, no matter what he might claim for himself, he and his buddies. Dark Cosmos and Nature's Blueprint. Those are the 2 books. And he's done television appearances with Morgan Freeman. Like he's found someone in the acting profession. It's about the level of competence that he's at in the scientific profession.
Yeah, we don't appreciate Morgan Freeman.
We don't like him. We're almost like on a no-watch situation with him, right?
He's really quite bad.
There'll be a no-fly thing for certain people, no-watch things for certain actors and directors, I suppose, too. Have we actually come up with a... No, really. It's more... But we should do that for directors, right? And Space's Deepest Secrets. And he's been interviewed on NPR Science Friday. Awesome. That's prime time, Friday nights. But this guy's prime time. So what Einstein got wrong. And I'm kind of just thinking I should be like a Bible thumping preacher. Wham, wham! You can tell how much they hate the Bible.
He likes talking with his hands a lot.
Exactly right.
So things like he gets excited. One time we were bringing my grandma a birthday cake.
Yeah, I was talking with my hands.
He was swinging that thing around.
Yeah,
we got it there, and it was not
all
a cake
flopped all over.
Yeah.
All the icing was all over the container. So, the icing was still there. I enjoyed it pretty good. It didn't look great. Got it out of the packaging, but
I picked out a really fancy cake, but James was very excited about it.
Hugely. I was just swinging along. Anyway, I'm not really regretful about it. I'm not even embarrassed about it. It's good to be happy about things. Anyway, I'm not happy. I'm happy about this because these guys haven't done their homework, and it goes back to 1905. Dude did an amazing... See, what Einstein got right. I mean, he has so much of what Einstein got right, actually. There's more about what Einstein got wrong, according to him. But he starts off with what Einstein got right. And it's things like special relativity. Okay, so dig this. See, like if you're actually writing a test, in science or in philosophy, and it's a true-false question test, and you write for an answer TVF, which means in logical parlance, true or false, and expect to get 100%. You write that for all of your answers and expect to get 100% on the exam. You're going to be sadly disappointed. You'll get 1/3 of 100%. And what I'm doing is I'm talking about the actual ciphers or numerals that go into 100%. 100% is made up of a 1 and a 0 and a 0. And the 1/3 that you'll get is a 0 on the test, if you get my drift. 0. So that's what Einstein did, because what he says in 1905 is, dudes, Thomas Young, about 100 years before me, almost exactly 100 years before me, so this is around 1800, Thomas Young, he proved by an experiment that light is a wave. And then Einstein comes along 100 years later, and he should be 100 years more wise. And what he's doing is he's doing this, it's what I would consider medieval thing. He's saying light is a wave and a particle. So what he's saying is somewhat like saying true or false. Light is a wave or a particle. The way physicists interpret it now is depending on whether what you're testing, what your test is true or false. And see, it's medieval thinking. So one of the things I kind of got over when I was about 17 years old, well, officially, is the idea that God was three things in one. God was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Three things in one. Any self-respecting scientist is going to say, that won't fly with me. And yet here they are. They're so they've improved things somewhat. It's not three things in one. It's two things in one now. Wow, what a huge step beyond medieval thinking. Two things in one. Light is a wave or a particle, depending on what sort of test you're running that light through. Brilliant. This is medieval thinking. And Einstein's supposed to be the greatest thinker, with a possible exception of Newton, who died almost 300 years ago. Died. And he was doing his work, the groundbreaking work, I guess, going back as early as 1666. Yes, that's 1666. That's a long, long time ago. And somewhere along the line, Einstein, who's his type of thinking harks back to the Middle Ages. Before the Middle Ages started ending around 1400 AD, 1500 AD, they're gone. Now this is well before Newton, and he's harkened back to this stupid kind of two-in-one thinking. So special relativity. That's he did a paper in 1905 that was that. He did a separate paper apparently on the light being a wave and a particle the same year. And he did one thing that was actually pretty good, which that year, 1905, he did a paper on the idea that Brownian motion seemed to prove that atoms, molecules existed. But that's how long ago it was. They weren't sure that atoms and molecules existed. 1905 is a long time ago. But here we're worshiping at the fame of this idiot, Einstein. There's so many things that we found out since. And the other things that he'd do is thought experiments. Thought experiments belong to the Middle Ages. Thought experiments are like, I wonder how many angels you can fit on the end of a pin. That's the kind of stuff Einstein did. What happens if I'm traveling along with light at the same speed as light? What's it going to be like? Or what's the effect of a gravitational field on a person inside a closed container, say out in space or something? What's it going to be like? Thought experiments. And here's one of the things that he got right, according to this thing. If you get a person in a closed container out there, he doesn't know what's happening to him outside.
There's two of those.
Closed container, two of what?
Oh, they are different cats.
Yeah, there are. There's some. Anyway, closed container. If that closed container gets accelerated, if it gets moved off in some direction, person won't know the difference if if there's an acceleration happening, or if he's been moved into a gravitational field. Galileo did this experiment. We don't even have to think about it. Did this experiment around 1600. This is roughly 300 years before Einstein is doing this thought experiment. So Galileo, he wasn't actually dropping apparently stuff off the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but what he was doing was he was rolling cannonballs or whatever down. That's a pretty good throw.
I was trying to get it to the cat, but I didn't quite.
Yeah, it's I think wanting to have a little bit
relieve
itself.
Yeah.
Scratching.
Those two gray cats, the gray and white ones, look almost exactly the same to me.
I probably.
They must be litter mates or something.
Yeah, I know. They really don't belong in this yard. I wish they'd get lost. Anyway, Galileo did these experiments on inclined planes with things, I guess, like cannonballs, and he found out that it didn't matter what the weight was of these sorts of things. They always traveled at the same rate, right? And here's the deal. You see, like, there would be a huge difference. A person's in a closed container, and the containers got accelerated. Let's say the dude is floating in a closed container, and it starts to get accelerated, Well, he's going to, if it gets accelerated up, all of a sudden, presumably, like he's oriented up, all of a sudden he could break his legs or something like that, right? Because the container is going to go like this, and he's going to be staying in place, right? It's called inertia. But what will happen if all of a sudden by magic, this is what you can do with thought experiments, a gravitational field moved in, like the Earth's gravitational field moved in? How tragic would it be for him? Like, would he get sucked down to the Earth, like scrunched up, his legs up against the bottom of the container that he's in? Of course not. Why? Because the container is going to get pulled down at the same rate. Doesn't matter how heavy it is or how light it is, could be made out of paper, at the same rate as Einstein, let's say, sitting in there. So the experiment's already been done. It hasn't been done. Here's this stupid doofus doing these thought experiments. We don't do thought experiments. We do real experiments, right? And it's that's called the equivalence principle. That acceleration is the same thing as gravity. It isn't. Galileo did the experiments that would prove that they're different, so long as you apply them properly. That's 1600. That's over 400 years ago. And this bozo, who's teaching at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, can't figure it out. So he's saying Einstein got that right. Wrong. He's got it right. Einstein got it wrong. Okay, what else did he get? Einstein got right general relativity. So Einstein is saying, what happens is with general relativity is basically gravity is not this force or something like that pulling on things, where two things pull on each other, really. What it is it's a warping of space. Okay, now here's what, this was even a medieval thinker or philosopher, whatever you want to call him, Occam. Is it William of Occam? And he came up with something called Occam's razor. And it's something like, an explanation shouldn't be any more complicated than it needs to be. Or I've heard it put as, thou shalt not multiply entities. Now, what does this mean? You see, like, the whole thing is with this gravity explanation is space is getting warped. Who cares how it works? It works. Why put in this warping of space? Space, when we're talking about space like Euclidean space or Riemannian space or Lobachevskian space, that is just a mathematical or geometrical construct. So we can set it up to be like Riemannian space or Lobachevskian space or Euclidean space, but it's just a construct. It's something that we use to explain stuff out there. So Riemannian space is good for explaining stuff that's on a sphere. Lobachevskian space is good for explaining something that's kind of like on an infinite saddle, shall we say. And Euclidean space is convenient for explaining stuff that's kind of like sitting out in outer space. Now, personally, when we're dealing with stuff that we're dealing with off the surface of the Earth and stuff like that, Euclidean space is probably the best thing to deal with. So Occam had figured this stuff out, like don't multiply entities. Don't be going around saying space is this, that, or the other thing. It's just a waste of time. Space is whatever we need for whatever job we're applying it to. And it's just a mathematical construct. It's like Einstein is so stupid. He's going around and saying, I wonder if reality on the Earth is the Mercator projection, or what is another one? There are other projections like the Peel Orange projection. The names are escaping me. None of those are the reality of the Earth's surface. They're just mathematical constructs that we use to picture the Earth. And this guy, Einstein's so stupid, he couldn't figure that out. Mogavida or something like that is another one. But you can come up with an infinity of ways of representing the Earth's surface, or portions of the Earth's surface. There's the Mercator projection, which grossly overestimates over-represents the areas of the polar regions, right? And stuff like that. It's good for getting directions kind of oriented the way you want them, north, south, east, west. But it's inconvenient, for other things, right? So this is just what Einstein got right, according to Bozo. This kind of stuff. I'm only giving you the lowlights. I could say the highlights, but it's the lowlights. Now, here's what we've got. Einstein's rejection of black holes. That's what Einstein got wrong. Black holes. Why do you have black holes? Well, that's interesting. Because you see light as a particle, according to Einstein. But, it's either a wave or a particle. So, Thomas Young proves it's a wave. Why do we need it to be a particle? Because, you see, they don't have a medium for light. Light has to be sound has a medium. There's a medium between me and the camera there, picking up my voice. And it's the air. It's a medium. It carries the sound wave. And what happened is there's this God. He's almost as much of a god as Einstein for these physicists, or as Newton. And his name was James Clerk Maxwell, spelled James Clerk Maxwell. Some people say, like this guy says, Clerk Maxwell. I've heard Clark Maxwell. If it's Clerk, so it goes. He's not around. Anyway, he was doing his work around the time Canada published his famous work, around the time Canada became a country. It's a long time ago, right? Coming up 150 years ago. Or has it been 150? It's been over 150 years. So, 150 years. Brilliant. Now, James Clerk Maxwell's going along and said, we're figuring out in outer space, and you got to watch with your terms what they suggest to you. There's no medium out there because it's just space. We'll call things like that a vacuum, or in vacuum tubes. Light was coming out of a vacuum tube.